Hi, I'm Kent Vaughn with Blaze Performance Solutions.
And I'm David Williams. And at Blaze Performance Solutions, we believe that complexity is at the center of some of the world's most significant challenges.
That's absolutely right, David. Complexity causes Americans to work among the longest hours of any advanced economy. We're time starved, busy, and often disengaged at work. At BPS, we specialize in simplification. Simplification, frankly, is the competitive advantage that allows you to be more innovative, more adaptable, and to thrive. And with that, today's segment in the Blaze Leadership Academy is all about engagement, all of those people that are disengaged at work. Now, as you think about engagement, let's think about the opposite of engagement. And so there are several things that come to mind when we think about that. One is you do something out of duty. Now, you can be engaged when you're doing something out of duty, but it's not the same thing as if you're really motivated and excited about doing the work, or maybe doing things out of fear. I'm worried that if I don't do this, I'm going to lose my job, or I'm going to get a pay cut, or I'm going to get yelled at, right? Or it could be things like resentment. I'm resentful about things that have happened in the past, or missed opportunities, or being passed over for some opportunity. Maybe I've given up, and we've all seen that where people finally just
Yeah.
have given up. Path of least resistance, like, okay, I'll just do this because I'm anything better. And finally, and David, I want you to give your comments about any of these. Finally, malicious obedience. So when you see all of those, David, what comes to your mind with all of your
Yeah.
experience in the workplace?
So it's actually this story just came as you were going through that. Several years ago, when I was a senior human resources representative in an organization, they had this on-site industrial psychologist, and some of the feedback that he gave to my boss, he says you need to understand something, that if David doesn't feel like you've listened to him or you haven't heard what he's saying, he goes, you don't have to agree with it, but if David feels like you haven't listened, then he will get indignant, right? And so when I think about the malicious obedience, it's that really is a blind spot for most organizations, because they don't understand. Oh, look, everybody's doing what we want them to do. They're so excited, they're so engaged. And if they're doing it based on malicious obedience, they're doing it, whatever rules, regulations, processes you put into place, they're doing it with the expectation and hope that it's going to fail, right? And so that malicious obedience is it's a big blind spot for organizations. So you just don't have your employees aren't engaged, or they're indignant, and they're wanting you to fail. So that's the one thing that really stands out to me as you went through that list.
It's what a great example. It reminds me of a story we both heard Stephen Covey say one time, and he was saying that if you bug people enough, work becomes the course of least resistance. If you stand over them, you make sure they do this, they clock in on time, they clock out on time, do all these things. They'll do the work, but that's all they'll do.
That's
They're not
all
going to give you anything extra. They're going to do what is absolutely required, but nothing extra. And in fact, David's about to talk about on the next slide about, well, things you get when you do have engagement around, well, let's just go discretionary, what? Effort, thought, and time. You want to talk about these, David?
Yeah. So when you as you think about these, engagement, and hopefully I'm not repeating, ourselves, but just to bring these points out, just for reinforcement. When I'm engaged, I'm going to give a good effort. When I'm engaged, I'm going to have more thought into what I'm doing. I'll also be looking at ways to improve whatever is being done. And when I'm engaged, I'm going to be giving the time, giving the time without having to be asked or told. Right. So these are things that everybody possesses. What's the right word I want to use? Discretionary tools, or this discretionary mindset. And through engagement, what you're doing is you're addressing the issues of effort, thought, and time. So that's what that means to me when I look at that slide.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. It reminds me, we were doing some work in a steel manufacturing plant just 2 or 3 years ago, And we had worked with the senior leaders, the middle leaders, and now we're working with the frontline employees, literally, and talking to them. And some things came up about some process issues. And I said to, a couple of, steel workers, they said, I said, so why aren't you talking about that with your team, to your team leader, et cetera? And they're like, he'll figure it out. Yeah, he'll eventually figure it out. And I thought, wow, that is the absolute opposite of engagement. I'm doing what I got to do to get my job, to keep my job. I'm doing what I got to do to get my paycheck. But I'm not going to give them anything extra. And even though I see an issue, an opportunity for improvement, we were talking about goals and how to help the organization improve on-time delivery to their customers. And this guy had some really good ideas, but so why aren't you telling anybody about it? And that's frightening. Now think about your own job situation right now. Have you got people on your team that are that way, that are bringing their very best effort, and they're on Monday morning, they're going, hey boss, over the weekend I was thinking about da 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 da, or they're not, and they're not thinking about it. They're not sharing with you the ideas or the insights. Dave and I have been in business together for several years, have known each other for nearly 2 decades. And David has, I will often say, a severe case of divine discontent. And it's in a positive thing. Another way to say it, it's a better way to say it, is continuous improvement. He's always looking for ways to how do we improve it? How do we make things better? Often on Monday morning, our executive staff meeting, he'll say, hey, dude, over the weekend, I read these 3 books. I have these ideas and and he'll share them. And I'm thinking, that's great, number one. Number two, I'm thinking, gee, I was mowing the grass. I was trimming the bushes. I was washing my car. I went to church. And I wasn't doing so I'm glad. By the way, David's a speed reader, so he is reading 3 books in the weekend, and that's fine. Me, I've been reading. I read a few things, but I wasn't like reading 3 whole books over the weekend. I read part of a book and some other things, maybe a car magazine or something. So he's a great example of someone who's bringing all of that discretionary time and effort and thought. We were doing some work years ago in a sausage manufacturing plant, and Dave and I've been doing work around strategy execution there for several months. We were back for a report out where the employees were sharing what they've been doing. And at the end of the session, the COO came up to us, frankly, a little misty-eyed. And he said, I've never seen these people so engaged. They're so excited because they knew what the goal was. They knew why it was important, and they knew they're part of the goal, what we call what, why, and my. And when employees understand the what, why, and my, it's amazing how engaged they get because they want to get their my. And they were literally hourly employees making presentations about, hey, I had this idea about how to reduce wrapper problems, or how to save some time by putting literally a nail here to hang the clipboard so I could work on. I mean, just all these things they came up with, great ideas. But because they were involved in identifying what the goals were and why they were important, and they're part of the goal, they were bringing every day this discretionary effort, thought, and time. And by the way, the results showed it. The results were phenomenal, so good that immediately the COO took us to the next plant, said, hey, they got same kinds of issues and they have some safety problems. Well, when you applied that same thought process, what, why, and my, to their safety problems, they did the same thing, cut their safety problems by 75% in 3 months, because people, again, were engaged. The difference between engaged and not engaged is amazing. So
Kent, what I mean, to show the opposite of that is, as he said, you and I, we've worked with clients all over the globe, and so you shared that great story about this workforce in a food manufacturing facility, and most of these frontline employees, GED, high school graduates, several probably hadn't graduated from high school, and they were engaged in that business, right? Because leadership came to them and said, we need your help. And they responded to the call, right? And then the opposite story, an opposite idea, thing that you and I both experienced at the same time working with another client. Kent and I were presenting, and we noticed that there was a couple of the older employees that weren't saying anything in the classroom. And so we had a break, and we followed them out there to say, hey, what do you think? What's going on? And much to our surprise, when we asked that question, they begin to give solutions to the problems that we were talking about in the classroom. And we looked at them and said, well, why haven't you said anything sooner, right? And they were like, well, nobody's asked us. I mean, it was that simple, because I wasn't asked, I'm not going to stick my neck out there, if you will. And so it's interesting when we see these share these stories with you. Just we've seen everything across the full spectrum of scenarios, and that one really stood out to me because they knew the answer to the problem, but they didn't answer it because nobody asked them. And the asking of them, you're going to understand why this is important. You're going to understand why asking the employee is critical to engagement when we start going through the four principles of engagement. So just keep that story in front and center in your mind as we go through these slides.
Excellent. So here's what we'd like you to do. We'd like you to think about, when is the time when you were most engaged in your work or personal life, and why were you? And to help kind of lubricate the skids of human interaction in your brain thinking about, Dave and I'll share some examples of when we were engaged or not engaged. So Dave, when's an example of a time when you were really very engaged or not engaged?
So yeah, the time that I was really when outside of you and I doing this business together, because obviously I'm engaged in this because it's ours. But the scenario that really stood out to me in my professional career, my time in my past, and my professional career was working with that great team in Tarboro, North Carolina. And so, I mean, what that team was doing was so strong. It got documented, and got put into New York Times bestseller, right? And so, uh, I was engaged because what was taking place in that plant, it was a whole group of people driving towards the same goal, right? And so everybody was saying, "What is my part? What can I do?" And trying to figure out, okay, if I do these things, it's going to have a direct impact. When you have that type of energy taking place, I mean, it makes engagement so much easier. And the employees, even though I was the general manager, plant manager of this, 400 employees, over 500,000 square feet manufacturing space. Um, Even though I was over those, had the responsibility for those employees, my team members, they were moving at the speed of light. They were coming to me, telling me, "Here's a problem that I solved, and this is how or this is a problem that I saw, and this is how I'm solving it." So they were identifying problems, I mean, way before even I would even see them. And so when I saw that type of engagement taking place, I mean, it was awesome, right? Because you didn't have to tell people well, you need to fix this problem. They were coming up to me and saying, "Here's a problem we identified. This is how we're fixing it," and saying, "Is it okay if we do it that way?" So that's when I think about that, that's probably when I was the most engaged in my professional life.
It's a great example. I was thinking about two things. One, the exact opposite of that. My first job out of grad school, I was a financial manager analyst for a Fortune 100 company in a plant, manufacturing plant. And after about 6 months of that job, I realized I'd made a mistake. But my wife was pregnant with her first child. We had bills. We had a little student loan debt, and I couldn't walk away. I mean, I needed the job, and we needed the insurance. And boy, you've all experienced that, haven't you? And it got to the point where on Sunday evenings I would literally get a stomach ache thinking about going to work on Monday. Literally get a stomach ache every Sunday night. Just almost get
Yeah.
ill thinking about going to work. And wow, that is a terrible place to be. And that lasted for almost 2 years. Eventually, I finally just said, I went to my boss and said, I can't do this anymore. And was able to move to a different job, a completely different part of the company over time. But eventually I thought, well, if I have to get fired, I have to get fired. But I can't do this anymore. And maybe you've had those situations as well. We hope not, but maybe you have. Now, contrast that with a job I had a few years later, where I remember talking to my mentor after about 3 months. Said, "How's it going?" I said, "Man, I would do this for free. Don't tell my wife, don't tell my mortgage company, but man, I love that. I'm just having so much fun doing that." And Dave and I both have had jobs like that, and we've also had jobs where you almost got sick going to work. So stop the video and take a minute and write down a couple of examples of when you have been most engaged in your work or personal life. If you want to talk about when you weren't engaged, that's fine as well. But stop the video, write some things down that will be helpful to you as you think how you're going to apply this for you in your job and your role, et cetera. So we'll stop talking for a second. You put on pause. Okay, welcome back. What we would say here is don't spend a lot of time, crying over spilled milk, meaning the bad stuff has happened. Yeah, learn from that, but don't
Learn.
let your past dictate your future, because it doesn't. Your past does not absolutely does not dictate your future, but what it can do is teach us. Oh, make sure you don't do that. I remember vividly decades ago having an experience in a job, and my first day, I was supposed to get a company car actually, and I didn't actually own a car. I was between jobs and school, and I didn't have a car anymore, and so that having that company car was a really big deal. I've been borrowing one of my parents' cars, and the end of the first day came, and they hadn't worked out the car, and it was kind of a big deal to me, right? And so they finally let me borrow something, and I drove it home. And I remember complaining to my dad that night about it. And what's funny is my dad was probably about my age, maybe a little younger than I am now, and he said to me, "Remember that when you become a leader in the organization.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Remember that." Boy, what great words to tell me. What great advice. He didn't say "too bad, so sad." He didn't say "I'm sorry." He didn't say. He just said, "Remember that, so that when you're the leader, you don't make those same kinds of mistakes." Because there are some things that are really big deals to people. So that really speaks to and leads us to what we call the 4 principles of engagement. And David's going to walk us through the first couple ones. So David, over to you, brother.
And I appreciate that, Kent. So the first principle of engagement, and then kind of give you an idea of how this thought process evolved within our own organization. We used to call this the 4 pillars of engagement. And after doing a lot of research and having conversations amongst ourselves, we said, no, what these aren't pillars, these are principles, right? And so these are things that organizations need to be doing to make sure that you're creating an environment where your employees can become engaged. Engagement is an output. Engagement happens because of all the things that are being done to me, for me, that causes me to be engaged. So keep that in mind that these are principles. If you violate one of these principles, you're going to find yourself in trouble. And once again, also understand that engagement is an output. Engagement as an output, it's not an input. So the first principle of engagement is number one, valued, right? And so, am I getting praise in a timely and specific manner? So, if I did something good today and it was really important to the organization, when does leadership come to me and tell me, "Wow, David, great job, great work"? And if they do it that day, boy, that's a big positive. That's reinforcement, right? Because it's timely and it's very specific. But if they wait a couple weeks, I'll still appreciate getting the positive feedback, but it won't be as impactful. Why? Because 2 weeks have passed. And then it's how many times do we sit down with people in a performance review and say, "Hey, over the last year, here's all these great things you've done, and we just want to say thank you." And you're going, "What?" you know. So praise needs to be timely and specific. So what did I do well, and why is it important for me to keep doing it, or the impact that it's had on the organization? The more timely and specific that is, the greater impact it's going to have on us, right? So behavior modification through positive reinforcement. The second component of feeling valued is I'm asked my opinion. Now, go back to the story that we were talking about earlier about the individual that had the answer to the questions, but didn't say anything because nobody asked him the question. And so, if you want me to feel valued as an employee, not only do you have to praise my good work, but you also have to ask my opinion. David, what do you think about this? Kent, we noticed you down there on the line, and what insights can you give to us? It is important to ask my opinion. So before I go on to the next point, Kent, anything you want to specifically bring out about the praise component or asking my opinion with the people who are watching this video?
Well, you think about it. An employee, a leader, anyone who feels valued is going to invest more in what they're doing, right? They feel valued.
Yep.
They feel like they're part of a team. They feel like they're making a difference. And those are some of the other pillars, right? But one of the ways we do that is by thanking people, catching people doing something well. And you might say, well, I thank them because I pay them. Admittedly, you do. But if you want to reinforce some very specific behaviors or actions, the more quickly you thank them or recognize that specific behavior. Wow, the way you handled that call with that customer was so good. The way you solved that problem with the way you did that report, the way you did that presentation. We're not saying go around and glad hand all the time, etc. But when people are doing the things you want them to do, It's no skin off your back to thank them, to recognize it. And I promise you, it brings great benefit and reward over time. Now, think about it for a second. This morning, when you got dressed, you put on a shirt, a blouse, a t-shirt, or whatever else. And when you were looking in your closet or in your chest of drawers or whatever, and you pulled out, you saw a shirt, and you're thinking, the last time I put this on, my wife said, well, that looks really good. Or a friend said, that's a great looking shirt. Or somebody at work said, wow, I love that. You remember it when you put it on again. Remember when you put it on again, and you think, well, I think I might wear the shirt again. Now that sounds kind of silly, but we all do that. I was at the parts store picking up a battery for my wife's car the other day, and there's a guy, beautiful big white truck with big wheels and tires. And I said, man, that's a gorgeous truck. And he said, thank you. It does look really good. I hadn't washed it since January. I'm so glad I washed it. It looks so good today. I think I'm gonna keep it washed. I guarantee the next time it was dirty, he was thinking, man, I had several people tell me how good this truck looked.
Yeah.
And I'm probably going to wash it a little more frequently. If it's a work truck, my family were farmers years ago, and so maybe not, right? If it's a work truck, but it wasn't that. This was a work truck that didn't go off road, right? So, and asking people's opinion, it doesn't mean you have to use them, but there is an old saying that says, "I don't have to have my way, but I have to have my say." And David said that so well so many times. When people are asked their opinion, you're giving them a chance to have their say, give their input. Again, I feel valued. You ask my opinion. Edwards Deming said something so powerful, that quality guru. If you don't know him, you should Google him, right? Look him up. He said, if you want to understand the cause and effect in any job, what causes things to happen, what are the effects on the job, you got to be talking to the person standing 12 feet within 12 feet of the job. Again, I'll say it again. If you want to understand cause and effect in any job, you've got to talk to the person standing within 12 feet of the job. Now, here's what you're thinking right now, perhaps. Well, I did that job before. I know that job better than they do. Yeah, maybe. Is it possible it could have changed? Is it possible they might see it differently? Is it possible they might have some ideas that never occurred to you? Maybe. What have you got to lose by asking?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. At least they know you think enough of them to ask their opinion. And that's a really big deal. Really big deal. So, Dave, why don't you take us to the second one, connected?
Yeah, so when we talk about being connected, we're not talking about uh, that we're sitting beside each other, or the organization has these great messaging tools. Whatever, CRM, human resources information system. When we talk about being connected, we're talking about three specific things. The first thing, and if you want me to feel connected within your organization, I got to have a mentor who is going to be somebody that will help me grow within the organization, regardless of where I start. Regardless if I'm a graduate from high school and I'm working on the front line, or if I'm a graduate from college and I'm going into a junior management position, who is going to be my mentor? Who is going to help me be successful? The second thing is that, what about my peers? Do I have a peer? Do I have somebody that's on the same level that I am, and I can go to them and say, hey, I'm experiencing this, I'm seeing this. Here are some ideas. So who's that person that more than likely I'm working beside, and do I have a peer or somebody that can help me get become even more engaged within the organization? And then the last one is being connected. I gotta have somebody rooting for my success. Who is going to be just excited about my growth as they are their very own? And this is a difficult uh, thing to do, right? For organizations. And so the reason it's difficult is you got to have the mindset is that, my success isn't just based upon me. My success is also based upon my coworkers, my team members. How can I help? How can I be helped? And who is that person that's rooting for my success? Because if I have that person rooting for my success, uh, I want to make sure that I'm not going to let them down. I don't want to do anything to discourage them and their belief in me. So we talk about be connected, mentor, peer, who's rooting for my success. And then the third principle of engagement is contribution. And when we talk about contribution, I can see how what I am doing is moving the needle on the school board. Too many times in working with organizations, when we go in there, we start doing a deep dive and we start doing these interviews and get an understanding of what's happening. So many times the employees just feel like they're on a hamster wheel. They go to work, they get on the hamster wheel, they spin, they spin, they spin. Then when they leave at 5 o'clock, they get off the hamster wheel and they come back into work the next day and they're spinning and spinning and spinning. And so the reason that happens is because they have no idea how what they are doing is impacting the goals of the organization. I need to see what I'm doing in moving the needle. So before we go on to the fourth principle of engagement, what other insights can you share about this important principle of engagement of contribution and being able to see, how what I'm doing is actually making an impact?
It reminds me of a story that usually I tell at the end, but it's a great time to tell the story now. Many years ago, a guy named Dr. Jarvik, who invented he and his team invented the artificial heart valve,
Yeah, yeah.
artificial heart, really, not just the valve, but the heart, was being interviewed by an author, Tom Peters, for a book he was writing about exceptional leaders around the world. And he'd flown in to Louisville, Kentucky to interview Dr. Jarvik, and it was the evening time. Because the kind of work of heart surgeries and things were done for the day, and so it was later in the evening, and he was interviewing him, and his pager went off, and pagers before cell phones, right? He got called away for an emergency, and he said, "Hey Tom, I'm sorry. This will probably only take 5 or 10 minutes. I need to go handle this situation. I'll be back in a few minutes." And Tom said, "Hey, no problem at all. We got all night." So Dr. Jarvik walks out, and within a moment or two, someone knocks on the door, and the guy opens the door up and says, "Hey, is it okay if I come in and clean up?" And he said, "Sure." So the gentleman pushed in a cart, and he was emptying the trash and tidying things up and dusting and doing different things in the office. And Tom Peters took the time to ask this guy about what it was like to work there at that medical facility, and what was Dr. Jarvik like, and so on and so forth. And asked several questions. And after just about a minute or two, the guy got a little frustrated and looked at Tom Peters, kind of stood a little straighter and straight, a little more erect, and straightened up his uniform. And he said, "Mr. Peters, it's real simple. Me and Dr. Jarvik, we save lives. That's what we do around here on our team." Tom Peters said, I knew all I needed to know about what kind of leader Dr. Jarvik was when the gentleman that was cleaning up at the end of the day knew he was essential to the process of saving lives. You thought, wow, they've got it figured out here. When everyone, all the way down, the gentleman cleaning up the office every night, recognizes his contribution, and not only recognizing his own contribution, but how it was making a difference. Every employee you've ever had, you ever will have, is making a contribution. The problem is so many times we don't recognize it, appreciate it, thank it, and say, well, that's their job. They get paid for that. Yeah, but does it hurt to say thank you? Does it hurt to recognize it? It doesn't cost you anything. My mother used to always say, please and thank you are the magic words. Well, that sounds a little touchy, feely, and that kind of thing. We get it. But you know what? Most people don't mind getting thanked for doing something. They really don't. They may not want you to put them on a pedestal and give them a big plaque, but a little recognition of how they're making a difference, how they're essential to the process of success in your organization goes a long way with people. Absolutely.
No, that's great, right? And so it reminds it's the little things. It's the little thing that makes all the difference. It's the attention to detail that has the impact. So when we talk about contribution, people just need to see how what they're doing is moving the needle. So let me ask you this question: those of you who are watching this video, how can you, or what can you be doing differently to have your team members respond the way that the janitor did when he said, "Well, it's quite simple, Mr. Vaughn. We save lives." And so, ask yourself, where are we? And are you doing that? Do you want to get there? So I think it's a good story to kind of illustrate the importance of the contribution. And then the last principle of engagement is I am growing. So I'm valued, I connected, I can see my contribution. There are people that are rooting for me. They are passionate about my success just as much as I am my own. And now I am growing personally and professionally. And so when we talk about growing personally and professionally, we're not necessarily talking about getting some type of academic certification. You went to a class, you're now certified, or you went out and you went to university and you got this degree to help you do your job. Now, obviously that's important, But I, as an individual, I need to be growing personally and professionally. And one of our clients, the CEO stood up in front. It was around 400 employees. It was a big leadership gathering of this organization. We were out in San Diego, California. And the CEO walks in and he begins to address all these senior, all these managers within the organization. And he goes, "People think we're in the landscaping business." He goes, "We're not in the landscaping business. We are in the people business. We just use landscaping as a way to impact the lives of everybody we come into contact with." And he further went on to say, we want husbands to be better fathers. We want mothers to be better mothers. We want spouses to be better spouses to each other, siblings to be better siblings to each other. And then he also said, we want our employees in the communities where they live, we want them to be having a positive impact on those on their communities. So not just where they were working with this landscaping company, but also having an impact on those communities. And I've never heard an organization articulate so well what this CEO said. We are not in the landscaping business. We are in the people business. And he was specifically talking about making sure that people grew personally and that they were growing professionally. And so, Kip, before we go to the next slide where you begin to wrap this up, any thoughts about the growing, the personally and the professionally, and the impact that this has on any organization when organizations make this they make a concerted effort to make sure this happens?
Well, in some jobs, it's natural, right? It's natural. There's gonna be opportunities for growth and movement and so on and so forth. And in other jobs, you've really got to focus on how do we give people opportunities to grow. I think about a manufacturing environment. I think about it in a retail environment. I think about in the landscape environment where people are doing this job and there's not a lot of upward movement, perhaps maybe not a lot of opportunities. So you got to get creative about what can you do. Or do you cross train people? Do you give them opportunities to try other things? I mean, what are you doing to help people? Now, we also know that there are some people, they just want to do their job and go home. We have a good friend in St. Louis who talks about he had a secretary when he was a middle manager with AT&T, and the regional manager needed wanted a new administrative assistant, and he said, "Wow, this lady that works with me, she's so fantastic. I would hate to lose her, but she's so amazing. We should give her every opportunity." So he put her name in, and the regional manager called her and said, "Hey, da da da." He said all these things. Would you be interested in coming to moving to Chicago and becoming the regional manager, regional administrative assistant, a lot more responsibility, more money, and so on and so forth. And she said, "Thank you, but no thank you." And our friend was kind of surprised. Well, they never really talked about it. Maybe 6 months later, another opportunity came up, and she heard about it, and she said, "Don't put my name in for that. I'm absolutely happy where I am. I want to be able to go home at 5. I like where I live. I don't want to do all that other stuff. I'm happy with this. So it's okay. I know you want to be president of the company one day," she said to him, "but I don't. And I'm just happy where I am." And so there's nothing wrong with that. We're not saying that people should want to become president of the company, right? Because most people don't. But people do want to have opportunities to develop and grow and do more difficult assignments or whatever else. In another program, we talk about accountability and delegation, and the ways we should be delegating to give people opportunities to grow and to develop. We'll save that for another time. But be thinking about that. It's really important. Really important to be thinking about what is it to mean to that person. What's important to them for with respect to their job and their opportunities. So where do you go from here? What do you do about this? Here's what we would recommend. We recommend 2 or 3 things. Number one, focus on both aspects of helping people feel valued. Timely and specific praise, and also asking their opinion. And again, we're not saying go around and say, "Great job, great job," or "Great job." By the way, saying "great job" is better than not, right? Better than not saying anything. So much more powerful when you say, "Great job solving that problem. Great job fixing that issue. Great job on that presentation. Great job with that report. Great job." Specific and timely. Waiting for the quarterly review or the annual performance review it doesn't mean much. It doesn't mean much. It's a box you're checking so you can give them a raise or not. We know Dave and I played in this space for so long. So don't wait and get their opinion. Secondly, think about what can you do to increase the connectivity on your team. If you're in a situation we have people that are working remotely and we're at the very end of COVID when we're recording this, you have some new opportunities there to do that maybe better than it's ever been done before. But what can you do? Be thinking about how can you increase this connectivity in your team, connecting people with mentors and growing opportunities, et cetera. And finally, back to timely and specific praise. Timely and specific praise really does help everyone see how they're contributing and growing. Why? Because you are thanking them and recognizing specific things they're doing and specific successes they're having. Here's what David and I also know. When somebody makes a mistake, if they're new on the job, yeah, help them out, help them understand that. Most of the time, when people on your team make mistakes, they already know they made a mistake. They don't need to come jump on with all 4 feet. They don't. You know, you may need to talk about it and ask them, hey, what happened? How can I help you? What would you have done differently? I mean, there's so many ways you can have that conversation, right? Instead of just saying, Vaughn, you are an idiot. Did you know that yeah, as a matter of fact, I did know. As a matter of fact, I did know. Sometimes people don't know, right? But we need to be very careful here. We're not saying don't, deal with performance issues, but there is an old saying, praise in public and do any correction in private, right? So in public, recognize them, thank them in front of the other team. But if you need to do some constructive criticism, some solving issues, then pull them aside, go into the office or whatever else and talk to them privately. Because when you embarrass somebody, they remember it. We've all had times we were embarrassed, and we don't forget those very easily, that's for sure. So we hope you've enjoyed this program. We hope you will go and start applying this immediately at work and at home. Raising kids, if you have children, it's amazing how well this works when you recognize the good things they're doing, catch them doing something well. I remember my mother telling me that years ago when our kids were young, and I thought, well, he's not doing anything well. What am I going to recognize? Well, he was, but I was so focused on the other things. What we know with certainty is people rise to the level of expectation. And if you're continually berating them and telling them all the things they're not doing well, they think, gee, why am I here? Because I can't get this right. Anything else, David?
No, I think we nailed it. That sounds good.
Hey, thanks, everybody. We hope you have a great day. Thank you for spending time with us. We look forward to seeing the future additional segments of the Blaze Leadership Academy. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.